My brother sent me a voice memo at 6:47 in the morning. Not a text, not a call. A voice memo, 43 seconds long, that ended with the words, "The account's been transferred. There's nothing left with your name on it. Don't make this weird." I sat on the edge of my bed, phone in both hands, and played it 3 times. The ceiling fan clicked above me. The coffee I'd set to brew the night before was already going cold on the counter. I didn't move. I just kept pressing play, listening to my brother's voice say, "Don't make this weird," like he was asking me to stop being dramatic about a parking spot. My name had been on that account for 6 years. Let me back up. I'm the oldest of 3. My brother, I'll call him my brother because that's what he is, or what I thought he was, is 2 years younger than me. My sister is 5 years younger. I grew up the way a lot of oldest daughters grow up, responsible before I was ready, dependable before I wanted to be, praised for being the steady one in ways that should have felt like compliments, but always felt more like a job description. When I was 26, I was working as a project coordinator at a mid-size logistics company in Cincinnati. I wasn't rich. I wasn't struggling either. I'd spent 4 years after college being careful, packing lunches, driving a 12-year-old Civic, putting a little away every paycheck. I had $34,000 saved. It had taken me 4 years to save that. 4 years of no vacations, no new furniture, no impulse purchases. I was proud of it in the quiet way, you proud of something that cost you something real. That's when my brother came to me with the idea. He wanted to open a food truck. He'd been talking about it for years. Smoked brisket, homemade sides, a logo he'd already designed on his laptop. He had a name picked out. He had a playlist ready for the speakers. What he didn't have was money. What he didn't have was credit history that any bank would take seriously. What he had was me. He sat across from me at our mom's kitchen table on a Sunday afternoon and walked me through the whole thing. He had a folder, printed pages, projected revenue. He'd done his homework, or enough of it that I couldn't find the obvious holes that afternoon. He talked about it the way people talk about things they genuinely believe in, leaning forward, hands moving, voice a little faster than usual. He needed $28,000 to get started. Equipment, permits, the truck itself, used but inspected. He'd pay me back within 18 months. He said it like it was a formality, the paying back part. Like the timeline was conservative and the outcome was certain. I asked him what happened if it didn't work. He looked at me the way younger siblings look at you when they think you're being unnecessarily cautious and said, "It's going to work." I gave him the money. Not all of it. I kept $6,000 for myself, which felt like a safety net at the time and later felt like nothing. I wrote him a check for $28,000, and he hugged me in the driveway and said I was the only person in his life who ever actually believed in him. I want you to remember that sentence. The first year was good, actually. He sent me photos. The truck at a farmer's market, a line of people on a Saturday morning, a cash deposit receipt. He paid me back $400 one month, $600 another. Small amounts, but they came. I didn't push. I figured he was reinvesting, getting stable, doing what you do when you're building something from the ground up. Then the payments stopped. Not all at once. They tapered. $200, then $100, then a Venmo for $47, then a Venmo for $47 with the note "toward the thing, more soon," and then nothing for 3 months. I didn't say anything the first month. I told myself he was busy. I told myself the summer had been slow, that he'd mentioned parking fees going up near the riverfront, that the city had changed some permitting rules. I made excuses for him in my own head before he even had to make them for himself. When I finally brought it up, we were at our cousin's birthday party. I pulled him aside near the back porch and I asked, as gently as I could, how things were going with the repayment plan. He sighed. Not the sigh of someone who felt bad. The sigh of someone who felt bad. The sigh of someone who was tired of being asked. He said the truck had a bad quarter. He said he was working on it. He said, "I thought you understood this was a risk." And that sentence landed somewhere in my chest and stayed there because I had understood it was a risk, but I had never understood that the risk was mine alone to carry. I nodded. I said okay. I went back inside and ate birthday cake and smiled at my aunt's new haircut. I didn't bring it up again for 4 more months. By that point, he owed me just over $26,000. He paid back maybe $2,100 total across almost 2 years. I had started doing the math in my head at strange times, in the shower, waiting for the light to change, lying awake at 2 a.m. I wasn't angry yet. I was something worse than angry. I was embarrassed. Embarrassed that I hadn't asked for anything in writing. Embarrassed that I believed the folder and the printed pages and the projected revenue. Embarrassed that I told myself the sigh at the birthday party was stress and not contempt. I called my mom. I shouldn't have, but I did. She listened. She made the sound she makes when she's processing. Little small exhales. And then she said something I've thought about almost every day since. She said, "Honey, you know your brother has been under a lot of pressure. He's really trying. It might help if you weren't adding to that stress right now." I was 28 years old. I had loaned my life savings to my brother, and my mother had just asked me to be less stressful about it. I got off the phone. I sat in my car in the parking lot of a grocery store for about 20 minutes. And then I drove home and I started writing things down. Every text where he'd mentioned the money, every Venmo, every conversation I could remember with approximate dates. I created a document and I saved it in 3 places: my laptop, my phone, a cloud folder I made specifically for this, and named something boring so I'd never accidentally show anyone. I didn't know what I was going to do with it yet. I just knew that if there was ever a moment where I needed to prove what had happened, I wanted to be ready. About a month after that, I was scrolling through my phone on a Tuesday night when I saw something on my sister's Instagram story. She posted a video from what looked like a family dinner: mom, brother, a couple of cousins, everyone laughing. And in the background, briefly visible on a counter, was a bottle of champagne. I texted my sister and asked what they were celebrating. She didn't answer that night. The next morning, she sent me a voice message, not a text. A voice message, which felt pointed in retrospect, and said that our brother had gotten a deal with a local brewery, a regular weekly spot at their tap room guaranteed through the end of the year. He worked so hard for it, she said. We're all really proud of him. Nobody had called me. I want you to sit with that for a second. My brother had just landed what was essentially a long-term contract, the kind of stable, recurring revenue that would have made repaying a loan very manageable. And the person who had funded the entire operation found out through an Instagram story. I texted him that afternoon. I kept it simple. I said, "Hey, I heard about the brewery deal. Congratulations. Can we find time to talk about the repayment plan now that things are more stable?" He left it on read for 5 days. When he finally replied, it was a long message. Longer than I expected. He said he was grateful for what I'd done, but that the money I'd given him had been more of an investment in the idea than a loan, and that investments carry risk, and that he'd never promised me a fixed repayment schedule, and that he felt like I was treating a family relationship like a business transaction. I read it twice. I read the part about business transaction, and I thought about the $28,000 check. I thought about the folder with the printed pages. I thought about the words, "I'll pay you back within 18 months, spoken at our mother's kitchen table on a Sunday afternoon. I didn't reply that day. I called a lawyer. She was a woman I'd found through a friend of a friend. She did contract and civil work, and she had an intake consultation for a flat fee. I sat in her office for 45 minutes with my phone screen shared to the chair beside me, walking her through the texts, the Venmos, the timeline I'd been keeping. She was quiet for most of it. She took notes. When I finished, she looked at me and said, "You don't have a written contract, but you have something." The texts were consistent. He had referenced the loan directly, his word, not mine, in at least 4 separate messages over 2 years. The Venmos, even the small ones, created a documented history of partial repayment that supported the existence of an agreement. It wasn't airtight, she said, but it wasn't nothing. She told me my options. I could pursue small claims for amounts up to a certain threshold or civil court for the full amount. I could send a formal demand letter first. Often, she said, people respond differently when something arrives on letterhead. I could also do nothing, which was always an option, and she said it without judgment. I told her I wanted the demand letter. It went out on a Wednesday. Certified mail to his home address, which I had because I was his sister and I'd helped him move in 3 years ago. I didn't tell my mom. I didn't tell my sister. I didn't post anything, say anything, hint at anything. I went to work Thursday and Friday and made dinner both nights and watched television like nothing was happening. He called me Saturday morning. I almost didn't answer. I let it ring 4 times and then I picked up. He did not sound like my brother. He sounded like someone who had just realized the game had changed and wasn't sure of his next move yet. He said, and I'm recounting this as accurately as I can, "I got something in the mail. I don't know what you think you're doing, but this is going to destroy the family." I said, "I think what I'm doing is asking you to repay the $28,000 you borrowed from me." He said I was being vindictive. He said I was doing this because I was jealous of his success. He said the brewery deal was something he'd built himself, and I had no claim to it. I said, "I'm not claiming your success. I'm asking you to honor your debt." He hung up. My mom called 11 minutes later. She had clearly already spoken to him. She used words like devastating and tearing us apart, and this isn't who we are as a family. She asked me to drop it. She said she would personally talk to my brother and make sure he took care of things informally without the legal involvement, because the legal involvement was humiliating for everyone. I asked her when it had become humiliating for everyone. She said, "What?" I said, "I'm asking when the humiliation started, Mom, because I've been waiting 2 years. I didn't hear anyone use that word then." She was quiet. I told her I loved her and I wasn't trying to destroy anything. I told her that I'd given my brother money. I'd spent 4 years saving and that he had made a choice not to repay it even after his situation improved. I told her I had tried to handle it privately and that hadn't worked. And then I told her that the legal process was already in motion and that I wasn't going to stop it. She didn't respond to that. She said she needed some time and she got off the phone. The demand letter gave him 30 days. On day 22, I got an email from his email address, not a text, not a call, an email which told me he probably drafted it multiple times and possibly had someone look at it, that said he was prepared to discuss a structured repayment arrangement. He proposed paying back the balance over 36 months, no interest, monthly transfer starting the first of the following month. My lawyer reviewed it. She said it was reasonable as a starting point and that I should counter with 24 months and a clause requiring a lump sum payment if he sold the business or any of its assets within the repayment period. I countered. He agreed. We signed a document, an actual document drafted by my lawyer with both our names on it and a notary stamp and a payment schedule in black and white. He signed it without comment. I signed it and felt something I hadn't felt in 2 years. Not happiness exactly, not relief exactly, more like the specific sensation of solid ground under your feet after a long time of not being sure what you were standing on. The first payment came in on the 1st of the month, exactly as scheduled. I didn't celebrate. I didn't post about it. I didn't call my mom to tell her. I sat in my apartment. On the couch, I'd finally let myself by with the $6,000 I'd kept back 2 years ago. A small, necessary act of giving something back to myself, and I just sat there quietly for a while. My sister texted me that same week. She said she didn't know all the details, but she wanted me to know she thought I'd handled things with more patience than she could have. She said she was sorry she hadn't called when the brewery deal happened. She said that should have been your call to get. It was a small thing. It mattered anyway. My brother and I don't talk much now. We're at the same holidays. We're polite. We pass the rolls and ask about work and keep things surface level, in the way that people do when something has happened that everyone has decided not to name out loud in a group setting. Maybe someday that changes. Maybe it doesn't. I've stopped expecting things from that relationship that it doesn't seem capable of giving me. What I know is this. I was 26 when I handed someone I loved a check for $28,000 because he looked me in the eye and said I was the only person who believed in him. I was 28 when I understood that being the person who believes in someone and being the person who gets to share in what they build are not automatically the same thing. And I was 29 when I stopped waiting for the people around me to decide that what had happened to me was worth addressing. I addressed it myself. They always say that money and family don't mix. I used to think that was a warning. Now I think it's an incomplete sentence. The full version is, Money and family don't mix unless everyone in the family decides to behave like they owe each other the same honesty they give a stranger. My brother never gave me that, not when it was easy and not when it got hard. But I gave it to myself, eventually, and the payment comes in on the first of every month. And every time it does, I don't feel vindicated or bitter or triumphant. I just feel like someone who finally stopped making herself small so other people could feel large. That's enough. That's more than enough. If any part of this story sounds familiar, if you've been the one writing the checks while someone else got the credit, I want you to know something. The window to protect yourself doesn't close the moment you should have acted. It closes when you stop believing it's still open. Don't stop believing that. And if you've been there or you're there right now, drop a comment. I read every single one. And if this helped, even a little, hitting like takes 2 seconds and it means more than you know. I'll see you in the next one. There's a version of the story where I stay quiet, where I keep covering for him at family dinners, keep telling myself it'll work out, keep shrinking the number in my head until it feels manageable enough to ignore. I almost lived that version. For 2 years, I mostly did. What I've come to understand is that the choices we make and the ones we keep avoiding don't disappear. They accumulate. Every time I chose silence, I wasn't keeping the peace. I was teaching everyone around me exactly how much they could take without consequence. That's not kindness. That's a slow erosion of your own worth, one unanswered text at a time. I think about the woman who sat in that lawyer's office with a phone full of screenshots and a document she'd been quietly building for months. That wasn't impulsive. That wasn't vindictive. That was what happens when someone finally decides that the evidence of what happened to them deserves to be taken seriously, by themselves first, before anyone else. That decision required something I hadn't fully developed at 26, the discipline to act from clarity, instead of from the fear of being seen as difficult. Integrity isn't only about how you treat other people. It's about whether you treat yourself with the same honesty you'd extend to a stranger. I would never have let a stranger borrow $28,000 with nothing in writing and a handshake and a sentence about belief. I did it for my brother because love felt like it should be enough to substitute for structure. It isn't. Love and accountability are not opposites. The most honest relationships, the ones that actually survive, hold both at the same time. What took me longest to accept wasn't that my brother had taken advantage of me. It was that I had quietly allowed the conditions for it. Not because I was foolish, but because I had spent so many years being the steady one, the responsible one, the one who held things together, that I had confused self-sacrifice with strength. They are not the same thing. Strength is knowing your limits and naming them out loud. Self-sacrifice, when it's compulsory and unreciprocated, is just a wound you keep reopening and calling love. The payment comes in every month now. 12 months down, 12 to go. I don't feel triumphant when I see it. I feel something quieter, the specific satisfaction of a person who decided that what happened to her was worth addressing and then addressed it. No one gave me that. I built it, one documented conversation at a time, one hard phone call at a time, one moment of choosing clarity over comfort at a time. If there is any lesson I would offer, not as advice, because everyone's situation is its own, it's this: the moment you start keeping records is not the moment you give up on someone. It's the moment you start taking yourself seriously. And taking yourself seriously is not a betrayal of the people you love. It is, in fact, the only way to love anyone sustainably over a long period of time. I took myself seriously. Eventually. That's the part I'm most proud of.